the deer, and I stopped the truck. The deer ran right up beside the truck and stopped and looked at me, and his tongue hanging out, and kept looking back toward the woods. And I saw something running through the woods, chasing those deer out the corner of that field. And it was running, it was tall, whatever it was running, it was black. And it, obviously wasn't a bear running on two legs, but something was running on two legs through them woods. And I only just saw it for maybe 2-3 seconds as it was running in between trees. But the deer were, I'd never seen a deer he wasn't even worried about my truck and me sitting there. He was worried about whatever was behind him chasing him. And I just saw it, like I said, for 2 or 3 seconds. And
in this episode of Bigfoot Society, I talked to Perry, a taxidermist. It's a very interesting episode as Perry has an eye for detail due to his trade being a taxidermist. The episode starts going north to Alberta as Perry recounts a white-tailed deer hunting trip, and then goes south down to Virginia with some very interesting encounters that happened on some private land just south of the Potomac River. Before we get into the episode, please take a minute, do something for me. That is free. Subscribe to this wherever you're listening. And if you're on YouTube, go subscribe on the podcast and vice versa. And please share this episode with all your friends that like Bigfoot and even the ones that don't. Share it to everyone because Bigfoot Society is going to the moon and we need your help to get there. And now, let's get into the show. All right, Bigfoot Society, we've got the privilege of talking to Perry, who is a taxidermist. Perry sent me a message, and he has some things to share about some encounters he's had over the years. But Perry, how's it going tonight?
I'm doing great. Couldn't be better.
And you had mentioned that you were working on something right before I called. You were working on a turkey or something like that?
Right. I just completed mounting a turkey.
I bet it looks good. That looks good.
Yes, sir. Yes, sir.
I'm curious to hear, you say you've got 2 different encounters that happened to you. Let's start with the Canada one, if you wouldn't mind.
Okay. I've joined 3 of my buddies to go to Alberta, Canada on a white-tailed deer hunt with a bow and arrow. And we got there and they had been up there hunting several times. And it was my first trip. So they kind of had their places where they usually like to go. And so I got to look around a good bit, and I found a really, really nice place, big soybean field on next to what they call the boreal forest, which is huge forest. You could, hundreds of miles, through the woods, probably till you find another road or something. There's not just like pig trail roads through there, but I ended up going and getting up in the stand right on the edge of the soybean field, and I've been sitting there for, probably a couple hours and just standing in the field. And I saw a couple of does walk out in the soybean field and were starting to feed. And about 250 yards across the field, there's like a clump of trees and grass and stuff out there that's, I guess, probably 20, 30 yards across or something like that. And just beyond the fence on the other side of the soybean field. And I noticed that part of it, and I was looking because I'd heard some coyotes yelping in there, and I was just kind of scanning around and looking for a nice buck, and something caught my attention. I looked across there after I kind of looked away, and I looked back, and there was something standing up next to the fence. And my first thought was, because there's big bears up there and all that, and I said, man, that's a huge black bear. It was black as soot, and this thing was standing there next to the fence, and it was like leaned on the fence. So I thought it was a bear because I've mounted bears with them kind of leaning over with their paws on a branch or something like that. And I did not have my binoculars with me. That's the only thing I really hate about it, is I didn't have binoculars to really scan over and check it out. But I got to looking at this thing, and I got to noticing the way the body was constructed on this thing, and it had shoulders on it. Bears, they have shoulders too, but their shoulders are more in kind of, if you pulled your elbows together and if you got on all fours, you'll notice that you're in a different position. Well, this thing was standing up, and his shoulders was broad and out. I mean, I mount animals for a living now. I'm a retired policeman, and been doing taxidermy for about 35 years. And this thing was standing there, and I'm guessing the fences are probably about 4 foot tall, and it was twice that tall. So I'm thinking, well, it's at least 8 foot. And I'm still not like grasping the situation so much. I'm like, man, I'm sitting there trying to figure out why this bear's got shoulders. If you understand what I'm saying, broad shoulders, you look at a man versus a bear standing there, the shoulders would be way in, tucked in, even if he's in a standing position. Anyway, I got to looking at this thing, and it was watching these deer out there. And then I got to looking at it, and I was like, this he's got a broad neck on him, but I don't see the nose on this thing. I don't see, I seen this thing move. I'm looking at it with just my eyes. I mean, I got good eyesight and everything, but I got to thinking, oh man, I don't think that's a bear. And I said, for one thing, if he's 8 foot tall, which I guessed him at, that's probably 600-700 pound bear. And I've got a bear in the shop here now. It's like 600 pounds, and it's 75-80 inches long from the nose to the butt of it. So that's a pretty fair assumption that it would have to be that big of a bear. And it just didn't. A bear's generally got like his head like goes right into his shoulders. He's real broad. This thing was different than that. It had somewhat of a neck like a human would, but big. This thing was big. And I just looked at it, and it didn't really move much. It stood there, and at one point, it pushed off of the fence and stood straight up more. And I was like, man, that ain't a bear. And at that point, I'm like, don't know what to think about it. And I'm like, gosh, man, I wish I had a pair of binoculars. I could really scan in on this thing. It's driving me nuts, And, I'm out there. I have shoddy cell service out there. This is, quite a years back, and cell phones didn't work really good out there. And my ride has taken 3 other guys to the stand, and he's probably 20 miles away from me right now. If I freak out and get scared or something like that, because I ain't had a gun up there. I just had my bow, and just kind of concerned at this point. And I hear these coyotes again starting up, and I'm trying to keep an eye on this thing out across there, trying to rationalize it in my mind that that's a bear and not nothing else. And I just could not say it was a bear. I've seen too many bears. I've been bear hunting in New Brunswick and taken 3 bears over there, and this thing could not have been a bear. And it's about 150 yards to the main woods from that clump out there. And I was looking to see where these coyotes was coming from, and when I looked back, this thing was gone.
Mm.
I mean, it was probably 10 seconds, maybe.
Wow.
So when I looked back, I was like, well, I'm starting scanning up and down the fence line, thinking, well, okay, maybe it's a bear. He went down on all fours, but the soybeans wasn't up that high, and I could clearly see the fence. And if he was that tall. And if it was a bear, he's going to be probably 48 inches tall at the shoulders, which is, I would be able to see that if he was like moving along if he went on all fours and was walking on all fours like a bear would. And I didn't see that. The only thing I can figure is that thing went into that brush over there and maybe sat down and was watching, or the coyotes, come up. He just wanted to kind of see what was going on. Well, the coyotes come up in there and did their thing, chased the does around, and I ended up, the leader of the coyotes came up there and I was able to get a shot and take him. And as soon as I shot the coyote, though, I got out on the stand, got it out of there, and went to the road. And I was making a phone call because it was starting to get dark, and I wanted to get out of there.
Sure.
And I don't get nerved too much, and because I hog hunt at night by myself, 12 midnight with a night vision and a thermal scope, and I walk around for hours, hog hunting at night by myself. It's no big deal. I don't never get freaked out, in Alabama, but up there is a different story. So anyway, got back to the truck, told him what I saw, and my buddy up there that lets us come up there and hunt, he didn't have much to say about it. He didn't, say I was crazy or anything, but I said, man, I don't know if I saw a bear or a Bigfoot, but this thing was huge. And I said it was standing for 10 to 15 minutes, leaned on the fence post. Kind of like you sitting there, your daddy's at the football game and leaned over on the fence watching you play football. This is what this thing was doing. It had so much human behavior, an upright bipedal creature or something would do, But got in the truck, went down the road, and one of the other guys had walked in, went into that deep forest that afternoon, and he was really unnerved about something that happened with him, and he would never, to this day, wouldn't really tell me what he thinks happened to him, but he walked in the woods and he said he felt like something was watching him, and when he walked in, he saw something really dark in the woods following him, and he said he thought it was walking on two legs, and he said I couldn't see it good enough to tell it was a bear or what it was, but he said it followed me all the way in, and he said I stayed in there a little while, and he says I had a half a mile walk back in there, and he says I got my butt out of there. He said I've been waiting up at the road, for y'all to come pick me up.
Wow. I
didn't even hunt. So, and he's a great hunter, killed a lot of big deer with a bow, and all these guys are professional big game hunters and stuff. And so he wasn't going back in there again. He hunted up next to this guy's house the rest of the trip, where it's kind of open. And if you want to come out standing, you can walk right over 300 or 400 yards and go to the guy's house. So anyway, one of the other guys had an experience. He was on a fence line hunting the trail, and he said the woods got real still and quiet. He said he could hear something walking up, crunch, crunch, crunch in the leaves, and he said he could just see something, but he couldn't tell what it was. He just saw movement through some brush, and it stopped. And he said he could hear it breathing. And he was kind of freaked out about it. And he couldn't really say what it was. But hearing him talk about it, I don't think he thought it was a bear. And of course, it's not going to be a deer, because a deer is not really going to have that kind of behavior anyway, like a man walking in the woods kind of sound in the leaves. And so he never went back to that spot again, and he ended up hunting with the other guy on the edge of a big field for the rest of the trip, and kind of in the open where everybody kind of stayed out of the deep woods. So that was pretty much my Canada trip. But pretty much everybody I talked to up there have had some kind of experience of some kind, but up there they wasn't really willing to say a whole lot about it. And because I've been interested in this for a lot of years, and it's one of those things, you got to prove to me before I believe it 100%. And, but that kind of rounds up my Canada trip there.
Perry, I have a few questions about the Canada trip, if that's all right. So, can you say what, I don't think I caught what area of Alberta this was up in?
Well, it's been so long, I couldn't tell you exactly what town it's close to. My buddy up there, his name was Nick. Really, really good guy, hardworking guy. But it was close to the boreal forest.
Was it up by Nordegg? Did Nordegg at all, or?
I honestly could not tell you.
No problem.
It's been probably 10 to 15 years ago. Yeah. That's it's been a while. That's the only trip I went up there. I had enough of Canada.
Right. Yeah. You were good after that. So thinking back, and I know you didn't see it for a long time, but do you remember anything about maybe the head shape of what you saw over there?
Yeah, I was, I'm sorry, I wasn't as descriptive as I should have been, but to me, it kind of looked kind of ridgy in the middle of the head, which was a bear's flat on top of his head. And that's something that I had to think about. And I'm glad you asked that question because it brings back memories. And that was the thing about it. I was waiting for this thing to kind of turn its head so I could see the bridge of the nose and all that and to verify what I was looking at. And it never did. It was just kind of looking straight back at me because the deer between me and whatever it was there. And, but it kind of, like I said, it wasn't flat on the head. It kind of went to a ridge on top of the head. It kind of looked narrow at the top or narrowed at the top from what I remember. And like I said, I couldn't make out any ears or anything, but on a big black bear, if it was a black bear, which I doubt, I'm about 99% sure that it wasn't. You probably wouldn't be able to see ears on the side of his head, their head being that big if it was a big animal. But the head wasn't built like a bear head. It was smaller, and it kind of looked kind of funny because the head was, in comparison to the shoulders, I mean, it looked like a running back out there, big, broad shoulders. And that's right there is what I'm like freaking out. What the heck is that?
Right.
And anyway, I mean, they don't, if you look at a bear, you go on Pinterest or something like that, and you look at a standing bear, and then you look at what people portray as a Bigfoot on pictures and stuff like that. One standing up facing, there's a big difference in the way they look. Just the same thing. If a man was standing out there versus a bear, you're going to see broad shoulders. It's going to be straight across but this thing was super wide, super broad at the shoulders, and his head, he didn't have a big blocky head like in comparisons to his body, like to a human. He didn't look like that. Just had a smaller head.
Interesting.
And he looked like he had a neck. And but I mean, like I said, I was the only one out there, and there ain't nobody that big walking around out there.
Right. Yeah. Yeah. Do you remember anything about its arms at all?
Well, like I said, he was kind of bent over a little bit.
Okay.
With his arms on the fence, and they were really long and looked like stumps. And like I said, a bear can have big stumpy arms too, but they're generally not that long. And if they're that big, they generally don't appear to have long arms. Like this thing, the more I think about it, the more I look at it in my mind, it's a long, lanky, wide, thick kind of critter. That's all I can say about it. I wish if I'd had my binoculars, I always had 10 power binoculars. I could have really identified this thing because I'd have had 10 to 15 minutes to really check it out. but it if I would have to say what it was, I would say it is not a bear,
Mm-hmm.
and it's something that I've never seen before. And I've like I said, I've been hunting all my life, and it's something I didn't want to get close to.
It's intriguing when it's especially paired with your fellow hunter friend having something happen to him that he's never mentioned to this day exactly what happened, you know?
Yeah, and he would be, because those guys were quite a bit younger than me.
Mm-hmm.
I'm their taxidermist, and they just happened to take me on a hunt. And like I said, I'm 59 now, but and they're like 40 years old, so I was quite a bit older than them, and they would have probably been more afraid of somebody teasing them if they said something. Me, I don't care. I mean, it's, you can have an opinion about me. I don't care. I'm the only one that matters when it comes down to the end of the day, what I feel about what I saw and everything. I'm not afraid.
That is fascinating. Perry, I got a question for you. We're going to take a detour for a few minutes before the Virginia one. So let's imagine that you're in your taxidermy shop, and all of a sudden a truck pulls up to the back of the shop, and there's something under a tarp in the back, and the gentleman says, "I'll give you $1 million, but you've got a taxidermy, whatever's in there." And you look underneath it, and it's a Bigfoot. What do you do? Would you do it?
Well, if I could have done it legally, yes, I would have.
Sure.
I would have tried, but I'd have probably got some of my buddies I compete with to help me on that. But
yeah.
I would freak out. I mean, really. I mean, there's a lot of, and that's one thing that I've talked with people before. I'm like, what would you do if you ran up on something in the woods like this? Would you shoot it? If you're sitting in a stand and this thing comes walking by you, would you shoot it? Me, absolutely not.
Mm.
Because there's I'm speaking kind of as a cop too, from 30 years of in law enforcement. For one thing, you got, I mean, there's obvious people out there going and pranking and stuff and doing all that. That's one thing would enter your mind. But if you shot something that's walking upright like that, you're going to be kind of be like that dentist that shot the lion that came out of the park or something years ago. Man, you're not going to live it down. They probably end up prosecuting you.
Oh yeah,
over something.
Yeah,
and I'm not that kind of hunter. I would not do that. I would probably, and I wouldn't let the thing come up and beat my brains out or something like that. But
right,
I would give it a wide berth of to get around me, or me. I would back out of there like I would if I'd come up on a bear or something. But yeah, that's kind of, it's funny because we have talked about that.
That's very interesting because, I mean, and you think about it, it's like, it's got to be a thing where there's not just one by itself. You probably, if you take one down, you're probably going to meet its brother or its brothers pretty quick. So you better be ready. But some wild stuff that goes on down in Oklahoma for sure.
Oh yeah. Yeah.
Oh,
yeah. There's, you don't really know what you do until you get put in that position, But,
that's a good point.
I've heard, people that had encounters and heard of people they think that have been killed by them, and other people say they just, they kind of go on their own way. They know you're not going.
Yeah.
They ain't really worried about you hurting them and stuff. And I dang sure wouldn't, shoot one. Absolutely wouldn't have shot one because I'd have been afraid of. I didn't make a good shot and get killed anyway. But I wouldn't mess with anything like that. I just couldn't do it.
Sure. That's
one of those things. It would be more of a. I'm curious how. I mean, these things they got to cohabitate with us if they're 100% there. Which I think they are, and I just wished I had a better experience with that incident there. I wish I'd had a pair of binoculars or a rifle scope or something I could look through and really, I just wanted to see that thing's face and make it out clear. And, that's just one of those things you'll ponder on the rest of your life. You get generally most folks only going to get one time. They're going to experience something like that. And, I'm kind of one of those guys,
Yeah.
But,
I mean, that it'll be with you for the rest of your life for sure. Did you ever get any weird calls when you're a police officer, like people calling in a Bigfoot sighting or anything like that?
No, I never did. Not in Alabama, I haven't. I mean, I've heard people say they, said they saw something they couldn't identify, but I've never had a call like that. I've had ghost calls and other crazy calls, but I haven't had any kind of Bigfoot because I policed in a big city and everything.
Okay.
And I think the only thing they would call the police on were crackheads stealing stuff at their house or something.
Sure. Yeah. I mean, I've talked to a few people about northern Alabama, and when you get out in the woods and the big forest out there, there's some very interesting Bigfoot encounters to do with hunters that have been reported, and they've found hunters just torn apart underneath their tree stand. And it's some wild stuff you've got to have down in that state for sure.
Yeah. Yeah. I would think if there aren't any in Alabama, they would be more up around Birmingham, up there with a lot mountainous terrain and bigger woods. And if I was one of those things, survival would be survival. I wouldn't want to be around humans. I might want to have them where I could maybe go and look at them every now and then, but have a safe retreat where I know somebody's not going to follow me, So that's why I guess they seek out those kind of areas around here. It's just dense forest and pine trees and stuff like that. It's not a bunch of mountains or anything like that, and big hollers and stuff like that. It's more flat where I'm at.
Gotcha. Well, Perry, let's talk a little bit about what happened to you in Virginia, if you don't mind.
Oh yeah. This is what really got me. I've been listening to the Bigfoot stories and stuff, and like I said, I was scared easy, man. I've been shot at and been in car chases and been deadly shootouts and all kinds of stuff. I ain't afraid of that kind of stuff, but the unknown stuff is what kind of gets you, And I was working for a plant farm and just trying to try something. I was driving trucks, and me and a bunch of guys were staying at a house down in off the Potomac River in Virginia, right on the across the river here in Maryland, and around King George is where I was at. And this road where the company would rent a house for you, a bunch of guys would stay out there, and we'd be gone for 5-6 months a year and come back and have all the time to hunt and whatever you want to do when you come back home and still draw a check. So we had this really nice house, 2-story house, and it was about 4 miles down this road, just a small windy road all the way down. We're probably 150 yards off the Potomac River, I guess. Big wooded area around the house. And I was in the bed one night, and it was about 11 o'clock, and I think only one of the guys was still awake. And he always kept his room, his door shut, and music, and watching TV and everything. So I said, well, I need to go out there and get some drinks. And I had picked up some bread. I was going to make some sandwiches for the next morning because I had to get up about 2:30 in the morning, get started. So I walk outside, just around 11 or 12, something like that. And I walk out to the parking area, and my Toyota truck's out there. And I open up the back door, and I'm getting these drinks out. And I'm kind of crouched down because I think a couple of them fell out of the case of drinks that I had. I crouched down, and I heard something hit my truck, bounced off my truck or my wheel or something right there, and kind of land right next to me. And it was a rock. And I'm like, I just kind of I was like, man, what in the world was that? A rock? Maybe I'm just, imagining things, that's that first thought. But, hair standing up on my back already. I'm curious, real curious. And almost about just a minute or so later, maybe 15 seconds later, I can't remember exactly, but a definite rock about 2 inches, I guess, in diameter, come flying over there, hit the gravel in the driveway, and kind of bounced up against the wheel again. I mean, almost hit me. And I look over in the woods, and of course, I don't see nothing. It's dark out there. So, not to scramble for anything. And my gun was in the truck, my pistol that I retired with. And so I just kind of slowly ease over, act like I didn't notice that. And I grabbed my gun. I'm like, all right, now I'm ready. I think I even actually grabbed an extra magazine, stuck it in my back pocket. I'm like, okay, somebody's messing with me. And then I got to thinking, man, there ain't nobody but us down here. And that all the guys in the house. And I look back at the house and ain't nobody messing with me. And where this thing come from, where it was coming from was with the big woods. And so I just felt my skin got that feel, and you feel like your hair's just about to jump off your skin, back your neck. You get that feeling, oh man, just like I used to get when I was a policeman. That like somebody's watching me when I'm going in the building with a canine dog or something like that. You always think you're gonna walk up on somebody, and just had that same feeling about it. I got my stuff and I got in that house pretty quick. And first thing I did is when I went in there, I checked everybody. Everybody was asleep. Nobody had been outside. And matter of fact, when I come in, they were snoring. And so I went to bed and just sat there in the bed trying to figure out what the heck that was. And so the next day, I think it was maybe a few days later, we had, maybe it was on the weekend, and everybody kind of got off. We didn't have to run that day or something like that. Some days we didn't have to run. But the younger guys, I don't drink or anything like that. They were drinking pretty good. And one of the guys went out and back, and he had a hammock back there, one of those that you can kind of roll up around your body and sleep in. And I guess you could use it to keep bugs off of you or something, at night. And he had fell asleep in that thing, and about 2 or 3 o'clock in the morning, he done passed out. He was drunk now, but he passed out in that thing, and he said he woke up and something was kind of pushing up against him. Now, he never seen anything. He said, but he said something. He think it was one of us messing with him. Nobody acknowledged anything, and nobody had been out there. And he said he heard it walk off in the woods. But that's pretty much the end of that story. That's all he could say about it. He said, look, man, I woke up. I was still a little drunk. He said, but I sobered up really quick when something touched me through through this little hanging thing, hammock. And he said it scared the piss out of him, and he was serious. And so I'm intrigued. Anything like that, I'm intrigued with that, So I don't know. It's probably, we were kind of getting toward the end of our tour up there, I guess. And I noticed one day when I come back home, I'd been in the store and I come back in, had rock throwing, something touched my buddy in the backyard. Came home, a tree lopped off about 9 foot up, 8 or 9 foot up, just broke over like we ain't had no weather, no bad weather, no nothing. There's no reason for that tree to just snap over, but it was in the backyard. And I called my wife and told her, I said, hey, told her about, we've watched this stuff, and it's just kind of freaky that how in the heck is this tree? I looked for another limb that might have fell out of a tree and hit it, bent it over and broke it. But the tree was probably about 4 inches in diameter, and it just snapped. And it was not a dead tree, because when it splintered when it rolled over. So, and I asked some of the guys, I said, hey, y'all ain't been out here monkeying around and breaking any trees because, we're renting this place. We don't want to be responsible for, paying for a tree or anything like that. And they said, no, nothing about it. So that was the second incident, or third incident there. And then it was pretty much, there was a bunch of deer, a bunch of game around. I mean, there would be deer in our front yard and backyard and all up and down the road all the time. And just a really gamey place. And one day I was right before we were done and were leaving out, it's like late July. And I was coming up the road, headed back out. I was going to go to Winn-Dixie or Walmart or whatever it was up there. And when I was coming up the road, I saw a deer out the right side of my cab of my truck on the edge of the field, and it was running full bore across that field with his tongue hung out. And I noticed a bunch of other deer running out of that's the same brick of woods that all these encounters kind of come from. And the deer, and I stopped the truck. The deer ran right up beside the truck and stopped and looked at me, and his tongue hanging out, and kept looking back toward the woods. And I saw something running through the woods, chasing those deer out the corner of that field. And it was running, it was tall, whatever it was running, it was black. And it, obviously wasn't a bear running on two legs, but something was running on two legs through them woods. And I only just saw it for maybe 2-3 seconds as it was running in between trees. But the deer I'd never seen a deer he wasn't even worried about my truck and me sitting there. He was worried about whatever was behind him chasing him. And I just saw it, like I said, for 2 or 3 seconds, and then it went out of sight. But the deer, they would run out in the field and they stopped around and looked, 100, 150 yards out from the edge of the woods. And they stopped and looked back in there, and they all looked like, they'd seen the devil. And it was maybe a few nights or a week later that I got all my stuff and was out of there. And I said, I ain't coming back. But I know this, everywhere up there, if they have Bigfoot sculptures and like trees that they've carved out with a chainsaw. They're everywhere, even up in Maryland. They were all over the place. And I get to talking to people about those things because I wanted to buy one, but man, they were expensive, man, like $4,000 for one of those sculptures. And I said, I'll just leave it here. And but they were like, yeah, had an experience. I was on the Potomac or one of the rivers or little tributaries off of the Potomac and ran into one of these things trying to scoop up fish. And there was just stories like that everywhere. Oh yeah, my son sees them, and there's I think there's if I remember right, off of 90, I think 95 may have been the main drag through going up from like Fredericksburg up to Washington, that big main interstate. I may not be right about that because it's been since 2017. But there's a military memorial. I think it's a Marine place up there, and I run into some people that said there's a bunch of government land around there, and they've been hiking out there and stuff, and said they'd seen them up there and had experiences with them.
Really?
So I mean, it was everywhere up there. And you come from Alabama, you don't hear much about it. When you get up there, it's like everybody has got a story to tell about it.
Right, and
just too much.
Yeah. If you could remind me, so where you saw this creature running through the woods real quick, that was private property, or was it like a public land, state forest type deal? No, that's all that land back in there is private property. Gotcha. The story was told to me, a colonel or a general that was on
the battleship or aircraft carrier when they signed the Japanese signed their surrender.
Mm-hmm.
I seen a picture of the man that had bought all that land in there, and he's dead. That is his wife or granddaughter, or is the only one that lives down in there, and he owned all that land back in there. But he was he had a picture of him when the Japanese were signing their surrender on whatever ship they were on. And I don't know I can't remember what important officer was there. Could have been MacArthur or somebody there. I don't know. But I did see pictures because that's who we were renting the place from. And or our company was renting the place from. But
very
I can tell you this. I would not live. I mean, as a hunter, yeah, but I wouldn't go out at dark out there.
Oh yeah,
that was freaky. Somebody throw a rock. I mean, what's the chances? I mean, you'd have to walk 4 miles down in there just to snoop around. You can't. There wasn't no vehicles out there. There's just ours, and that was it. And the old lady lived down the end of that road, and that was it. And I don't know anybody in their right mind would walk in them, as dark as that is, in them woods, would walk around out there. No. But it threw rocks at me. And I mean, when it happened, I was like, I'm thinking, good night, man. This is like right out of a story I've heard,
Right, yeah.
Growing up. And then a tree busted over. I'm like, good night. I told my wife about it, and we discussed it, and crazy. I haven't seen nothing like that in Alabama.
Right, exactly. Thinking back to and I know it was only for a few seconds that you saw the creature running through the woods when the deer were nearby. When you saw it running for a few seconds, was it near any deer at all?
I would say the closest it was about 50 yards.
Okay. And
now you think about this now, and I just thought about this. You run out of deer, and he's going to be in the next zip code. At least these deer around here. You take a run at, within seconds they're gone. And whatever this was running fast, and he wasn't far off the heels of at least one of the deer. And this one deer looked like he'd been chased for a while. Because his tongue was hanging out of his head. And a deer don't get winded running, 150 yards out of the woods. They don't get that winded like that. It's like when they're completely stressed, that's kind of an indicator right there when they're stressed. Because I used to raise deer years ago, and I've had dogs come around the pen and scare them, and but it takes a lot of agitation for one to get. I think to be hanging his tongue out like that, So whatever it was after him and scared the crap out of him, and me too.
Well, yeah, absolutely. So I was asking that to see. Did you see it run by anything that could give you an indication of how tall it might have been?
Well, all I remember is that this thing's like 150 yards across the field in a wood line.
Yep.
And I never went over there to try to figure that out. And
right.
But for me to see it, if it had been like a human or something in a black suit, which, there's no way it could have been. It just, because there's no way they would have been able to get that close to a deer running like that and kind of keep up with it, so to speak. And whatever it was big, tall, and was running fast. And I was thinking, first thing I thought is, I always think it's a bear, but this thing wasn't running low to the ground. This thing was running high. And it was on two legs, and it, you see it, and you don't you rationalize, try to figure out what was that, and then you kind of play it back in your head, and you're like, oh my God, man, that thing was running on 2 legs, and it was big. That's all I can tell you. I wouldn't say it was 6 foot tall. I would say it was beyond that. It had to be. I mean, I've been a trained observer for 30 years, and I don't have the answers to everything, but I've been a hunter for forever since I was 7, 8 years old. I've been in the woods hunting, and I've seen a lot of things, and that's definitely something that caused a confusion in my head. I mean, I don't get confused about it. I mean, I see them all the time. I can look at something in a split second, tell you what it is, but I couldn't tell you what that was in a split second. It just freaked me out because I'd never seen that ever. And I've seen moose, bear, elk. I've been in Wyoming hunting out there, been everywhere, and I have never seen nothing that big like that ever. So
it's fascinating accounts, definitely.
And that's pretty much all I have that I can recall that I've been up to Cades Cove where they said they had some issues up there with people running into them and everything, and taking my wife up there and
where's that at?
Cades Cove is in Kentucky.
Oh, I'm not familiar with that. So
not Cades Cove. I'm sorry, not Cades Cove. I'm talking about land between the lakes.
Oh, you've been to LBL. Oh, yeah. Well, I mean, that's.
I've been to Cades Cove too. That's in Tennessee, but LBL's in Kentucky, and I'd been up there hunting. Me and my wife went up there on a little mini vacation and stuff.
Really?
And she said she heard some hooping off and then a holler and everything. I didn't hear it, but she said she did. And my buddies at the local shop up here, the bow shop, was like, I had told them about it, and when she came in there, they were giving her a hard time. They're like, hoop, hoop, hoop,
jeez,
messing with her and stuff, and we laughed real hard about that. But she said she would never go back.
There's some weird stuff.
Where we were at, there was nobody. Mm-hmm. There was nobody, man. Nothing but woods for 2 miles. There's nothing. And she swears I was putting up I got bad ears from shooting guns all my life. I was up there putting a trail camera up kind of over a hill there, and she was at the truck, and she heard some hollering or hooping down in the woods down there. And when I got down there, she had her eyes looked like Adam Schiff eyes,
mm-hmm.
real wide and stuff. She's like, hey,
sure.
Get the truck, we're out here.
Yeah, I mean, and I've talked to people where they have had really interesting things happen in that forest, for sure.
It is huge. Yeah, I mean, some of the biggest white oak trees you'll ever see, and there's graveyards all through there.
Really?
All up there. I mean, that's what we did. We drove her little Toyota 4Runner. We would go up these little old roads and stuff, and I don't know how many we looked at, but we found graves we found a couple from the 1700s in a graveyard up there, and a lot of from the Civil War. And I mean, you don't hear highways back in there. You don't hear nothing. It's way back in the woods. And but yeah, there's been a lot of sightings and stuff up there
of Bigfoot, and even well, it's primarily known for dogman sightings and some pretty vicious ones at that. I've talked to a few people about that, but there's definitely some Bigfoot sightings and encounters in that LBL region. So that's very interesting that your wife heard those sounds. Who knows what could have been out there? Sure.
It was. Trying to think of the there's a place where you can rent cabins. It's been several years since I've been there, but you can, first part of November, a lot of bow hunters in there, renting cabins. And it's the only place on the LBL that you can rent cabins. I just can't think of it right off the top of my head, but, they have a whole bunch of cabins down there you can rent. Cell service down there sucks.
Yeah.
But you get up on the other side of I guess the northern side of the LBL is a little bit hillier. You can get a lot more better service up that way. But you walk off down in the bottoms, you ain't get no cell service. I don't like being out without a cell. Grew up without one, but man, we like it.
Yeah, no, I get it. It's weird not being able to connect with loved ones or a safety professional if you need one. But sometimes you go to areas where you can't do it. But Perry, this has been a really fascinating chat. Some super fun accounts. Thank you so much. And I hope people listening to this, maybe this will jog something in their memory about something they experienced in Virginia or Alberta, Canada. And you're more than welcome to send me an email if you'd like to share what happened to you at bigfootsociety@gmail.com. And we can start the conversation there for sure. But Perry, thank you so much for spending some time with me tonight.
Absolutely. Have a good day.
Here at Bigfoot Society, our goal is to provide a platform for those that have encountered Bigfoot to share their encounter in a safe and respected environment. But we need to hear your story. If you've experienced something that you just can't explain, please send me an email at bigfootsociety@gmail.com. Then we can start the conversation. And I know a lot of you have not shared your encounter at all. It's been 20 years, and it's time that you get this off your chest, and then you can get some well-deserved rest, because I know you haven't been sleeping. I understand what you're going through, and I appreciate every one of you listening.